Here is the buret being placed in its appropriate clamp. As you can see, it's just a double pressure clamp. And you want to set it up, again, depending on whether you're left-handed or right-handed, which way you want to do it, which way you put the valve in the bottom. Now, before you do anything, we need to make sure we condition the buret. What that means is the following. When you receive the buret from the stockroom, it will have been washed, but there will be tiny drops of water still in the inside, in the interior of the buret. And we need to kind of like dilute that out, remove it, because if not, when you add your titrant, your test solution, what's going to happen is it's going to get diluted with the water that's in there. So what we're going to do is the following. Of course, your goal is to test this solution of KOH that you made in part A. We want to put some amount of it here, like 5 to 10 milliliters, to rinse out the interior of the buret, but it's hard to pour from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a small beaker, like this one here, and I am going to pour some of my KOH solution in here. Something like maybe 60, 70 milliliters, just approximately. In order to put it in here, what I want to do is I want to make sure, first of all, that the valve is closed, which means it's perpendicular to the body of the buret. I'm going to use a funnel. So I'm going to grab a funnel. I'm going to put it here on top, right? And I'm going to pour very carefully about 5 to 10 milliliters of my KOH, right? I don't want to use it all. And then what I'm going to do is very carefully take the funnel out. And then I'm going to carefully remove the buret and turn it on its side so that the liquid inside is kind of horizontal and can essentially cover the interior of the buret. And then I'm going to spin it very carefully to make sure that all of the interior of the buret is essentially washed with my KOH solution. All right? Now, what you want to do is you want to have some beaker around just for making sure you can get rid of waste. So I'm going to pour my waste into there. All right? This is to avoid having to make multiple trips to the sink. And notice that when I open the valve completely, the liquid streams down. And I want to make sure that it's all out of there. And now, some authors recommend doing this twice. Our burets are fairly clean, so I only need to do it one time. I'm going to put my buret back in its clamp. Again, for those of us who are vertically challenged, this is a little high, so I'm going to put it down a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to fill the buret. I'm going to grab my funnel again. I'm going to put it in here and be careful because sometimes the funnel will create a seal here with the mouth of the buret and it will not allow liquid to flow freely. So when you first pour this in, you might want to hold the funnel up a little bit off of the lip or the mouth of the buret. And now we're going to fill it up very carefully. We want to go above the 0 mark on the buret. So that'll take roughly about 50 to 60 milliliters total. Be careful once you start reaching the top so you don't overflow it. Okay, so there I am. I am right now above the 0 milliliter mark. Let me show you some close-ups of the next few steps. I'm going to show you, first of all, what are some of the ways of delivering liquid from the buret. And then I'm going to show you how to properly read the volume that's displayed on the buret.
I wanted to show you these close-ups so that you can see how you can play with the valve here to adjust the flow. But first of all, let me show you something. One of the things you'll notice here is, if I can move this camera out of the way here for a moment, is that when I filled the buret, I don't know if you can see, there's like a bubble in there at the very tip. You can see it there. I want to make sure there are no bubbles in there for two reasons. One, it alters my reading of the volume. Two, it might actually block the flow of liquid. Bring it back over here. So one of the first ways that you can do it is by simply opening the valve completely. In other words, getting it to be completely parallel to the body of the buret. And what that will cause is a full opening of the valve. And so your liquid will flow in a stream. Notice that there's still a bubble in there, so I want to get rid of that. There you go. The second way that you can use the buret is by drop-wise addition. So in this case, you slightly open the valve just a little bit until you can get either a fast or a slower drip. This is the type of addition that you're going to use during your titration. Now, another thing that happens is that because water molecules have strong forces of cohesion, in other words, strong attraction between the molecules, as you can see, as the drop forms at the tip of the opening of the buret, it takes a little while before it actually falls down, before gravity is able to pull the drop down. And so these drops are actually fairly big. What I'd like to do is control that, and by the way I do that is by doing a very quick 180 turn like this. And what that does is it delivers a very, very tiny droplet into my solution. In this case, that's going to be the titrant. Okay? These are the ways that you can use the valve to deliver the titrant liquid in different forms. Okay, students, notice that when I filled the buret, I kind of went past the 0 mark, but that's ultimately where I want it to be. So I showed you some of the ways in which you can empty out or deliver the titrant, in this case the KOH that we're trying to determine what its concentration is. So what I'm going to do is very carefully, I am going to try to bring this down closer to the 0. Notice that because the water is in a narrow glass tube, it forms a meniscus. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the valve down at the bottom of the buret and very slowly bring it down until it reaches the 0, and that's where it's going to stop. Okay? So notice that now the meniscus is pretty much, oh, sorry, I kind of hit it a little bit. It's right there. So if you want to help yourself, what you can do is you can take like a ruler and maybe put it like in the back just so you can see better where the meniscus is. Make sure always you are at eye level with the meniscus. You can also use a piece of paper. Make sure the meniscus, the bottom of it, is actually on the line you're reading. And don't forget, a buret is calibrated in tenths of milliliters, which means that when you report a measurement, you report it to 2 decimal places. Now we are ready. Our buret is conditioned and set up. We are ready to do the titration.
Okay, students, when you go to the stock room and you are given your kit, you're going to receive a test tube that has a sample of KHP. Remember, KHP is not a formula. It's an acronym for potassium hydrogen phthalate. All right? And it's a solid, it's a high molecular weight compound, which makes it very stable for the kind of test we're going to be doing. Now, you're going to receive in here an amount that is equivalent to 2 trials. So what you want to do first of all is you want to split it, and you can do this by simply getting another test tube from your drawer. same size. And just by eye, we'll kind of split them up into two, half and half. Okay, so something like that, what might do, all right? And then we're gonna save one of them for later, and we're gonna use one right now. So let's take this to the balance room to show you how we're gonna do it.
Okay, students, we're back here at our analytical balance. We have turned it on and made sure that the display is not jumping all over the place. Remember that any vibration on the surface of the table or any air currents could actually cause this to shift around. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our Erlenmeyer flask and we're going to tare it. In other words, we are going to zero out the weight of the flask. We use the re-zero button here, the red button on the machine. We press it and make sure that it doesn't drift around too much. There we go. So now what it means is that anything we put inside the flask, the machine's going to give me the exact mass of that substance because it's already removing the mass of the flask. So I'm going to take the sample. Remember that I got from the stockroom. I split it into two. So this is one of the half samples that I'm going to use for my trial. Very carefully, let me open here. Let's go very carefully and pour it inside of there. Try to get most of it out. And we're going to place it back in there. Let the display stabilize. And we have 1.0272 grams of KHP. So we're going to take that now back to our benchtop to get it ready for our titration. Okay, students, this is my KHP solid inside the flask. I made sure that I wrote down on my data sheet how many grams exactly it had to 4 decimal places. And now what I want to do is I want to dissolve it. We're going to add water, and this is approximate. We're going to add about 50 milliliters or so of water, which in this case would be kind of like the bottom line there. This doesn't have to be very exact because what we're concerned with is not the concentration of this particular solution, but the number of moles we have in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my distilled water squirt bottle, and I'm going to squirt water down. And what I want to make sure is I squirt it down the sides. Oops, did a little spillage there. Just to make sure that I get every single crystal of this solid in there. Okay, and I'm going to pour it until about 50 milliliters or so. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to swirl it to dissolve it. Now here's the thing. KHP as a substance may or may not be very soluble in water at the concentration we have here. So you may have to get a little help in getting it dissolved, and you do that by heating it. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to get our Bunsen burner. I'm not going to turn it on right now, but you understand how to do it, right? We're going to have our Bunsen burner, and we're going to use that for this next part. Okay, students, I have my Bunsen burner turned on here, and there's a couple ways you can do this. For example, one of the ways that students use is they take one of these old clamps, and they use it to hold the flask in place. So I'm going to put it in here. Oh, let me open it a little more so it'll fit there. Okay, you don't want it to be super tight, but you want to make sure it doesn't slide out. So what you can do is bring now your flask and run it over the cooler part of the flame. Just give it enough heat so that this thing will probably dissolve a little better this way. Don't let the water boil inside, okay? It's just the cooler part of the flame just to get it to heat up. Another method that students use if they don't have access to these clamps is to make a collar, okay, a collar with none other than paper towels. So what I'm going to do is, let me move the Bunsen burner out of the way a little bit here and show you what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to take like a strip of paper towel and I'm going to fold it a couple of times to make like a little band like this. And then what I do is I bring it around the neck of the flask like this, and then I twist it on this side several times. Okay, I'm going to twist it several times. Make sure that it's tight. And that'll basically create a collar that holds the thing in place, and so I can bring back my Bunsen burner. And same thing again, I'm going to roll it slightly over here and just let it warm up until I can see that all of the solid is dissolved. Okay, students, we have our buret ready. We have it set up. We know what the initial volume is. This is our flask that has the dissolved KHP. And one thing we're going to do is we're going to add an indicator. The indicator is phenolphthalein. We're going to add about 2 drops of that into our mixture. And phenolphthalein is an indicator. You tested it in part A, and you know that in the presence of acid, it doesn't have any color. But in the presence of base, it turns pink. Now, we're going to use it as an indicator to find, as we explained in the video, in the PowerPoint, what is called the end point of the titration. Since we're looking for a very faint color, it helps to put a white paper underneath and then put our flask in there. Let's bring the buret a little bit closer to the mouth of the flask, all right, so that we don't risk losing material. And now what we're going to do is we're going to open the buret valve to deliver a drop-wise delivery. So we're going to take this just little drop by drop, because the first time we do this, we're not exactly sure what the end point is going to be. So we're going to open it very slightly to deliver a drop-wise motion. And as we deliver, we're going to be swirling our mixture. All right. So after a little while, what will happen is you're going to start seeing little swirls of pink in the solution that's in the flask. Keep on swirling until those swirls of pink persist for roughly about maybe like a couple of seconds instead of disappearing right away. Okay, so once you see that those swirls of pink are just lasting for a few seconds, you want to stop this. Now what I want to do is, since I was swirling and I may have missed a drop, I want to make sure that all the KOH I delivered was in there. So I'm going to bring back my distilled water rinse bottle, and I'm going to give it a squirt all around the sides of the flask to make sure that I get everything that was in there, that I didn't miss any drops of KOH. Remember, the concentration of acid in here doesn't matter. What matters is how many moles we have. So from this point on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that technique of the quick 180 turns to deliver a micro drop. So I'm going to go one like that, and I'm going to swirl it. And I'm going to do another one, and then swirl it, and another one, and swirl it, until you get to a very, very, very faint, almost imperceptible pink color. Let me put the camera in on close-up so you can see more or less what that looks like. Here it is. Here it is. You can see it. It's a very, very blush kind of color. Actually, if you can get it even lighter than that, that'd be great. But this is a pretty decent titration. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to come back up here to our buret, and let's see what was our endpoint. Where does this sit? I'm reading right now about 11 point, I'm going to say 11.20 milliliters perhaps. Again, don't forget, you can help yourself with a ruler. Just put it in the back so you can see a little better where it's at. You can see it there. Okay, so that is your final volume. Here is your reaction flask. Now, what we're going to do is we have another prep, right? We have a second trial. Your goal is to find 2 trials that will let you calculate a concentration of the KOH in 2 trials within 5% of each other. Remember, we finished the first titration at about 11.20 11.20 milliliters, or something like 11.25 or so. Now, we don't have to refill the buret. This volume now becomes the starting or initial volume of the second trial of our titration.
Okay, students, once you have finished, you may have some KOH that has been left still in the buret, and we don't want to throw it away. Remember that we had our storage bottle. It turns out that we may be able to use this in a future experiment, and that all depends on the program for a particular semester. But we want to save it, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that clean beaker that I was using to dispense the KOH, and I am going to empty out the buret in here. Just let it go. Okay, once I've finished it, I can take that residual KOH that I recovered and put it back in my storage bottle. And I'm going to save that for a future experiment. So we're going to put that in storage. Now what I need to do is I need to clean the buret. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to put my waste container under here just to avoid the spills. And then I'm going to take some water. At this point, we can use simply tap water. So all I'm going to do is rinse it out. So I'm going to put in a bunch of liquid in here. This is all just tap water. I'm going to fill it up almost to the top. And what I'm going to do at this time is I'm going to empty it out a little bit just to rinse out the bottom, the tip of the buret. But after that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take it and pour it in. I'm just going to pick up the buret and just pour it down and turn it a little bit, a few times. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat this several times, and then maybe like a couple of times with tap water. And then one full wash with distilled water, all right? And I can do that using either my dispenser bottle, or if I have a beaker or a container with distilled water, I can do that. Right? And it has been cleaned, but there's one more thing I have to check before I return it to the window, okay? So let's go to the close-up view here.
Okay, students, at the window of our stockroom, you're usually going to find this clipboard that has strips of pink litmus paper on them. Remember that pink litmus paper turns blue if it comes in contact with a base solution. Well, our buret had a titrant, which was KOH, which is a base. I want to make sure that I got rid of all of it. So what I'm going to do is, after I have rinsed out the buret, I'm going to bring it over here, and I'm going to touch the tip of it, which still has perhaps like a little drop of liquid in there, to one of these strips, and make sure that it doesn't turn blue. Let's see. There you go. So that's perfectly clean. It just got wet. So that means the buret is clean and we can return it. Otherwise, if the pink litmus paper gives you any hint of blue in there, the stockroom attendant is going to give it back to you and tell you you need to rinse it a few more times with distilled water. All right? So that's pretty much it. And now you can return the buret back to the stockroom, and then you can continue and finish cleaning the rest of your glassware. Remember that you are saving the KOH residue that you had in there, and also make sure that you are not being required to pour other chemical waste into a special container. Your instructor and your stockroom attendant will inform you of that. Thank you so much. Okay, students, hopefully this video presentation gives you an idea of what are some of the techniques that you would use if you were doing this experiment in the lab. Obviously, at this point, you're in an online only remote instruction mode. But hopefully what we showed you here is enough to give you a sense of what would have happened if you had been in the lab physically. Now for our next part, what we're going to do is we're going to take a sample set of data, and we are going to show you how to do the calculations so you can find what is the exact molarity of your KOH solution. Thanks a lot. We'll see you later.